Hello everybody, Zachary Wheeler here, and welcome to our second episode where I will be exploring Marvel Comics in the past 5 years and how they have changed in order to better represent the ever-evolving political landscape and allow better representation of minority characters within their pages. Today we will be focusing on one of the original members of the X-Men, Bobby Drake, better known as the Iceman. Before we talk about Bobby Drake, we need to understand who the X-Men are. The X-Men are one of Marvel's more popular line of comics beginning back in the 1940s, created by Stan Lee himself. The story of the X-Men follows around what are known as mutants in the Marvel Universe, humans who have been born with an extra gene, and because of this, they begin to develop superpowers. Because of these developments, the rest of humanity fears them and what they are capable of. In reaction to this fear, they begin discriminating and oppressing the mutant population, sending them into hiding because of fear for their lives. One of the main examples of what happens to mutants is a man known as Magneto. Magneto was a sufferer of the Jewish Holocaust during World War II, and because of the terrors and discrimination he witnessed there, he decided to strike back against humanity before mutants were subjected to the same horrors. This all led to a man named Charles Xavier founding his school for exceptional youth, where he would collect mutants who have faced discrimination and train them to use their powers in order to better and protect humanity so that one day they might be accepted and counteract the radical ideas of Magneto. One of the first mutants Charles Xavier would recruit for his team is a man known as Bobby Drake. Bobby Drake would be the youngest member of the founding X-Men, but that would not keep him from being one of their most powerful. As his superhero name Iceman suggests, Bobby had complete control over sub-zero temperatures, being able to convert his body into ice and snow and create any object he wanted to out of the material. As the X-Men expanded and evolved as a comic book franchise, so did Bobby Drake as a character. Thanks to his charm and ever-optimistic attitude, Iceman would become one of the more popular members of the X-Men team, leading him to have his own solo series and spin-offs, and even leading the X-Men over the next 70 years. As his popularity and personality increased, so did his powers. Over the next few decades in his comic book life, Bobby would discover that he could create anything he could imagine out of ice, as well as, if he ever saw fit, throw the world into the next ice age, making him one of the most powerful mutants on the planet. When Marvel Comics released its 2015 Secret War crossover, much of the comic book universe was reset by the end of it, allowing modern readers a place to jump in. And one of the many franchises rebranded during this time was the X-Men, and Bobby Drake specifically. The X-Men were set into two different comic book lines, the first being X-Men Gold, which followed the more traditional X-Men that we have known over the past 70 years, and the other being X-Men Blue, which focused on a team of the original X-Men lost out of time as their younger selves, and forced into our modern world, learning how to adapt. X-Men Blue allows us to follow the young incarnation of the team through the modern world as they see how mutants have slowly become accepted but still face certain struggles, as well as the many other social injustices plaguing our nation. One of these injustices that Marvel Comics seeks to address through the X-Men Blue line is the representation and acceptance of the LGBTQ community, with Bobby Drake lying at the center of this storyline. Our focus begins when the X-Men Blue team returns from space. Upon landing, Jean Grey decides to ask Bobby Drake to speak privately for a minute. Jean Grey is the team's resident telepath, meaning that she is able to read minds and pick up on emotions that other people cannot. Once the two are alone, Jean confronts Bobby about something that he's been keeping from everybody, and asks why he has not told anybody that he's gay. Bobby is initially shocked by the accusation of his sexual orientation and disturbed that Jean would invade his mind like that and read his innermost personal thoughts. But then, seeing the opportunity that he has before him, he begins to confide in Jean everything that he's thought up until this point, being afraid to ever address his sexual orientation, especially considering the time period that they come from where such things have never even been addressed. It is at this point during the conversation that Bobby Drake makes a note that he has met his future self at one point and that he was given no implication that he might be gay. Jean addresses this concern by telling Bobby that the time period in which that person grew up and the time period in which they are initially from, it would be impossible for a mutant to come out as gay, as life was already so difficult for people with their condition. This is much similar to how in the real world African Americans and other ethnic minorities have an additional stigma attached to addressing their own sexual orientation out of fear of being accepted. At this point, the conversation between Bobby and Jean begins to die down a little bit, and Bobby Having a friend that he can confide in begins to feel better, and Jean assures him that she will not tell the rest of their friends until he is completely ready. At this point, we'll skip forward in the comics a little bit to the next time that Bobby Drake's sexual orientation is mentioned, and that is during a confrontation between the younger Iceman and the future version of himself. During their conversation, the young Iceman mentions that he has come to terms with his homosexuality and questions his older self if he feels the same way, and that if he does, why has he kept it hidden inside this long? His older self admits that when he was younger, he had these thoughts and feelings, but he was never able to come to terms with them, already being ostracized from the rest of society. Thanks to this conversation, both of the Icemen are able to come to terms completely with their homosexuality, and both agree to stop living in secret and share this with their friends. It is at this point that we will stop focusing on the younger Bobby Drake and deal with how the older Bobby Drake begins to come to terms with his homosexuality and telling his friends and family. To do this, we will look at the 2016 solo run of Iceman that follows around the older Bobby Drake as he continues his life as a full-fledged member of the X-Men and superhero, as he comes to terms with his homosexuality and comes out of the closet to his friends and family. First, he comes out to his teammates on the X-Men, who react initially very well. The only complaint is that it took him this long to admit that he's gay and to come out of the closet to them, and that they would have understood this whole time. Unfortunately, when Bobby comes out to his family, the reaction is not as warm and welcome. After Bobby admitted to himself and his friends that he was gay, and he came to terms with who he really was, one of his immediate concerns was how he was going to break this news to his parents. He thought in his mind that he had already put them through enough and made them suffer by being a mutant. How could he also do this to them? But after a fateful accident, when Bobby Drake's father suffers a heart attack, he decides that he needs to do this now if he ever is going to have the chance to do so. When Bobby finally comes out of the closet to his parents, his worst fears are realized. His mother breaks down into tears and his father breaks into a rage, both demanding how could they do this to him? How could their only son betray them like this? After they have an emotional argument, Bobby Drake storms out of the house to take his mind off such things by doing what he does best in fighting crime. By the end of the issue, though, him and his dad do get back together, meeting at a park on a bench in a blizzard. It's here that Bobby Drake really begins to open up to his father. He begins to tell his dad about his powers, and a trick that he learned a long time ago about how he can become one with water vapor in the snow, to literally disappear into thin air. Bobby states, "I want to disappear sometimes, leave my skin, forget my problems in a big way, and just be nothing, even for a moment. I think about being nothing a lot." After a brief pause, his father puts his arm on his shoulder and says, "Bobby, no matter what, I love you. Nothing will ever change that." And he walks away into the snow. After gaining this sense of closure with his father, Bobby Drake continues on with his life as a superhero, fully coming to terms with who he is, but not allowing that to stop what he has to do. Iceman continues to fight crime and save the world, while also trying to balance his new personal life. The older Bobby Drake beginning to experiment with his newfound sexuality, and the younger Bobby Drake finding love with another gay superhero named Romeo. It is important to note now that while Marvel has used the story of Bobby Drake to reach the LGBT community and provide a better representation for an audience that is wildly ignored, being gay is not the only thing Bobby Drake still is as a character. He remains one of the strongest and most prominent characters in the Marvel Universe. Bobby Drake's coming out story is meant to give gay and lesbian readers a hero they can connect to, but also one that is not defined by their sexuality, just as they are not. Throughout Marvel Comics, Bobby Drake the Iceman has always been a symbol of hope and change, there to face any adversity. Whether the conflict is personal or world-ending, Bobby Drake is always there to save the people who need him. Still remaining one of the strongest people in the entire Marvel Universe, Bobby Drake has frozen over hell itself in order to save his friends and the Earth. Bobby Drake's story serves as a template and inspiration as how gay and lesbian characters can be further utilized in the Marvel landscape throughout the years to come.